It's so fun to be together. I've missed you guys. It's funny, isn't it? We've had a whole bunch of services in the run up to Christmas, and yet a couple of days apart, and it's so good to be together in person and online. One thing I should say is that we normally give as part of our worship. In the old days, you remember those before the virus? We used to pass around buckets, red buckets, and people could put money in there. But we can't do that anymore. So a slide is going to come up on the screen, which is a QR code. And so you can point your phone at that, and it will tell you how to give. Actually, it'll probably just take you to pattonchurch.org/give, which is our website for that. But giving is part of our worship, so I encourage you to get on board with that. Now, I think all of the kids are getting on with their activity packs. That's brilliant. They're also more than welcome to listen to me. We'll see how that goes. What have you guys been up to over Christmas? Have you been doing anything fun? Have you been playing loads of silly games? Have you been dancing and making merry, eating too much? I've certainly been eating too much, yeah. I tell you what, one thing, we've been playing loads of silly games, and actually, I got really into playing that Just Dance game on the Nintendo Switch yesterday, that was, and I'm really hoping that there isn't any video evidence of that, and that it's not going anywhere near Facebook, because honestly, dad dancing doesn't quite cover what I'm capable of these days, so it seems. But we were also playing this game called Bananagrams. Has anyone played Bananagrams? It's basically a bit like Scrabble. But the thing is, I'd never played it before. I don't think I'd ever even seen it before. It's like these little, basically like Scrabble tiles that come in a yellow bag. And anyway, so I think I wasn't really present when the rules were being described. Now, it could have been that, either I wasn't physically present, or I might just have been not quite mentally present. But anyway, when the game started, I realised that I had no idea what the rules of the game were. And I just kept trying to play catch up with what was going on. And then just when I thought that I'd sussed it out and knew what was going on, somebody would say something like, peel. And I'd think, I've got no idea what that means. What on earth does that mean? Or dump, they'd say. I mean, anyone played that game? I just was, by the end of the game, I think I just about worked out what was going on. I was feeling slightly anxious, but I hadn't fallen off my chair, I hadn't walked off in a huff, and I'd managed to just about get to the end of the game. But I definitely hadn't won. I don't know. For me, that kind of sums up the way 2020 has gone for me this year. How do you feel today as we arrive on our last Sunday of 2020? Are you feeling like run ragged? Are you feeling like the rules have changed? Either the COVID rules or just anything else? You've just permanently spent the whole year playing catch up. Maybe you started the year thinking that you were pretty much on top of things and you were actually getting ready to smash it, and then suddenly the rug was ripped from under you and you don't quite know how you ended up where you've ended up, but you've been kind of left behind. If that's you today, you are not alone. I think people across the world are feeling like that today. It's fair to say, isn't it, that this last year has impacted our lives in ways that we had no idea about a year ago. Our relationships, perhaps our mental health or our physical health, our lifestyles. I mean, you remember when we used to be able to hug people, or when we'd like randomly bump into people in the street and we'd sit there or stand there chatting for ages without being moved on, or like a whole raft of different things. We'd go to the pub with people and just enjoy ourselves. So much has changed. So much has changed and been impacted in the last year in our town. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, what are we going to do about the Oasis? It's like, so much has changed. So much has been impacted. Our bank balances, our job security, perhaps, has changed this year. The thing is that as a Christian, I know, as the writer of Hebrews put it, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Or as the psalmist put it, God is our refuge and our strength and ever-present help in times of trouble. Or as Isaiah put it, God is our shelter from the storm and our shade from the heat. So at the start of 2021, the end of 2020, when we stood right on the cusp of that, more than ever before, I think we need to fix ourselves to God. We need to swim towards his goodness, perhaps against the tide. We need to decide now, at the end of this year and at the beginning of the next year, that we're going to worship Jesus like never before. And that's why this morning we're going to be looking at some brilliant people in Matthew's Gospel, and we're going to see what they did. A familiar passage from Matthew chapter 2, and I think the words are going to come up on the screen behind me. Hooray! So Luke chapter 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he'd called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, and by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Next slide. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." After they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. So, we three kings of Orient are, about which the first thing that we know is that they probably weren't kings, and there probably weren't three of them. So we'll just call them the wise men. And I love these guys for a few reasons, but costumes aside, I mean, who doesn't love like a bit of gold and embroidery and perhaps a fancy hat? But they're yet another example of God using the wrong people, understanding and worshipping Jesus first. It started with the shepherds over Christmas. You remember shepherds, like working class people who work with animals, and yet they were visited by angels, and then they got to be included right in the heart of the Christmas story there. Seeing the baby in the manger, these shepherds. But Jesus was this long-awaited Messiah for the Jewish people, and yet the first people after the shepherds to worship them were these guys, these wise men from the east. They weren't just not Jews. They're from a whole other religion. They're magi, which basically means like astrologers. Think of Russell Grant. There's a reference for the kids there. And they were Zoroastrians, whatever that means. They're from another religion. But they come seeking the King of the Jews. So today, it comes about that we're looking at these outsiders, these people from the wrong crew, as a great example of worshippers of Jesus. And that's the way that it seems to go, isn't it? Again and again, through the whole of Scripture. It seems like every week one of us will stand up here on a Sunday and we'll be talking about how God loves people on the outside and he brings them close to his heart. And it's the same with these wise men from the east, from the wrong tribe, and yet God includes them right at the heart of what is going on. And they become worshippers of Jesus. So I want to pull out a few quick things from their example which will help us today as we set our course for 2021. And the first one is this: the wise men, they are seekers and therefore they are finders. These are people who spent their whole time looking for the signs. Now it seems that they saw the signs in the stars, which is pretty unusual. But it seems to me that God speaks to us in all kinds of different ways. These guys are open to the voice of God. Now, actually, I actually followed a star once. And so it'd be slightly weird if I didn't tell the story of it now. I was in France on holiday. I was at a bit of a crossroads in my life. I was on holiday with my family, and we'd spent the whole of the first part of the holiday talking about what on earth are we going to do? How's this going to work out? And my wife, Hannah, she said, well, why don't you go for a walk and a bit of a pray about it? So I went for a walk, and I'd kind of explored the area where we were staying quite a lot. I'd been jogging there through the days. But as I went out of we were staying in a mobile home thing. As we went out, there was a beautiful sunset that was just extraordinary, and I was just started to thank God for His beauty, actually. But then, as I got kind of round the corner and then into a forest, dark descended really quickly, and it was really, really dark. I mean, we're not really used to the dark here living in Swindon, are we? Because of all the kind of the street lights and the light pollution and everything. But here I was in the middle of the French countryside, and when I say it was dark, I mean it was properly dark. I literally couldn't see my feet. I couldn't see the path at all. I couldn't see my hands. And I started to get panicked, actually. I was worried that I was lost. I was worried that I was in danger. And actually, I started to worry that if a farmer came along, he'd be like, what on earth are you doing walking around in my sort of forest in the middle of my field bit without a torch or anything? Are you up to no good? And I started to worry about what he might say to me. And then, just as my panic sort of reached a crescendo, the cloud just started to clear, and I started to see the stars in the sky. And as I looked up, I just about remembered from when I was a scout that if you look for the sort of the saucepan bit and then follow the end of that, the bright star, you can tell I'm not really an astronomer, but that's north, right? So I started to follow this star because I knew that if I walked north, I'd be able to get back to somewhere where I knew where I was. And all of a sudden, I had this sense of peace come over me. And I realized actually that God was speaking to me. And it was like the panic that I was feeling about being lost or being in danger or the fear of what other people might say to me. Actually, that was the place that I was at in my life at that point. I was worried that I'd taken a wrong turn or that I was lost or that I wasn't going to be able to do what I wanted to do because I'd ended up in the wrong place. And I had, in my life at that point, a growing sense of panic. But God spoke to me through the stars that day and gave me that sense of peace. You know, I think I want to say to us today that God can speak to us and reach us however He wants. And that all we have to do is seek and look, and we will find. It's interesting, isn't it, that the wise men went looking, and then because they look, they found Jesus, who is God. We see that quite a bit on Alpha. You know, people who aren't Christians, who are on a bit of a journey, seeking something spiritually, maybe something of meaning or spiritual experience. And what they actually find is Jesus, who is God, who gives them peace and freedom and a knowledge of love that they never would have thought when they set out on the journey. But it's not just Christians. I think all of us need to have our eyes open. If we walk through 2021 with our eyes closed, we'll miss out on the incredible journey that God has for us. Jesus says, I think it's in Matthew 7, like further on in Matthew's Gospel, in the Sermon on the Mount, seek and you will find. I wonder, do you need some peace today? Seek and you will find. That is the promise. I love reading biographies of incredible Christians, people who are set as a great example. I love books about George Muller or Brother Yun or Corrie ten Boom or David Wilkerson. These incredible people that have lived incredible lives and had amazing things happen to them. But even brilliant Christians in our church or brilliant Christians that I've met, and I'm often looking at them and thinking, oh, I wish I could be like them. But the truth is that they are seekers. They are looking all the time to see what is God doing so that I can join in. So that's the first thing that the wise men teach us. Let's be seekers and we'll end up finding. And the second thing is this. They joyfully gave their treasures. That's what it says, isn't it? They joyfully gave their treasures. And I wonder what they would have made of the baby when they found him. You know, they'd walked, they reckon, up to 1,000 miles, these guys, to end up, first of all, in Bethlehem, in Jerusalem, with Herod in the palace, and then at Bethlehem. I wonder what they'd have made of it. Their search took them to this backwater town. Do you know that Bethlehem was maybe a few hundred people? It wasn't anything special. And then when they got there to Bethlehem, they found the teenage Mary and a baby in really quite poor circumstances. It would have been easy for them to go, oh, you know what, that's not quite what we were looking for. Or that's not quite what we expected. You know, we'll take our gifts and we'll just take them back where we came from, or we'll give them to somebody like more deserving or something. But they didn't. It says they were overjoyed. It says they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. So my question is this. How often do we get to the point of giving out all and then somehow we just stop short? I'm not really talking about money this morning. It's much worse than that. I'm talking about everything we've got. It's like if I hear my neighbour is poorly and I think, oh, I'll make them some soup. I know what they'd like. They'd like chicken soup. That'll make them feel better. So I go and I get all the ingredients and I chop up the onions and I get a nice chicken. I put that in the soup and maybe a bit of cream and some seasoning and I make it taste really yummy. And then I think to myself, that is really yummy. You know what? My neighbour will probably get better all by themselves. I'll just keep the soup for myself. They don't need it as much as I do. And I forget that the whole reason that I made the soup was to give it away. Imagine if the wise men were like that. Imagine if they travelled 1,000 miles on foot to give their gifts. And then they thought, oh, you know what? I'll just keep them for myself. Probably, what would a baby do with frankincense anyway? Even though it was a really different circumstance probably to the one that they imagined or expected, they gave joyfully. So in 2021, let's make that decision today at the end of 2020. Let's joyfully give of our treasures, of our gifts. No matter what we find, no matter whether the circumstance is what we expect, let's give out of what we have. And you know what? I know that if we take that example from the wise men, that 2021 could be an incredible year for all of us. So that's the first thing, let's be seekers and we'll end up being finders. And the second thing, let's joyfully give our treasures. And then the last thing is this. They bowed down and worshipped. It's a beautiful picture, isn't it? Of these well-traveled, wealthy, educated people who are used to mixing among kings. That's why they went to see Herod. They assumed that you'd find a king in a palace. But it says that when they arrived, they bowed down and they worshipped. Worship is the great leveler. Shepherd or wise man, they worship Jesus. I don't think we've got any shepherds in Patton Church. Happy to be corrected on that. I think we've got some wise people. But what we offer in worship can be beautiful, can't it? It's the great leveler. It changes our perspective. It reminds us what and who is important. It's what we were all built for. It's life-giving and life-changing. So let's be seekers. Let's joyfully give our gifts. And let's bow down and worship Jesus with everything we've got in 2021. Just imagine how different this coming year might be to the year that we've just had if we dived into that. What are the ways in which you could give of your gifts or of your stuff? Or what are the ways in which you could bow down and worship Jesus in your daily life, in your workplace, in your school? How can we be on the lookout for what God is up to in every area of our lives? Sometimes it's so easy, isn't it, to come on a Sunday and to enjoy church. But let's keep our eyes open to what it is that God might be saying to us in this coming year. One of the most incredible things is that if we look out for what God might be doing, we get to be included. We get to be on the inside like the wise men, seeing what God is up to. We might feel lonely, but we can be right at the center of what God is doing in Swindon.